JG. Welcome back to Music Forever. Today I'm going to be counting down my top 10 favorite Linkin Park songs. I feel like I've been talking about Linkin Park too negatively lately with having reviewed their new album and the track Heavy from that album initially when it was released. You know, if you saw my review for that album, you would know I didn't like it at all, and the track review, obviously, I didn't just classify that as a track review. It was a track review and a rant, so, you know, wasn't feeling that last album. But Linkin Park are one of my favorite bands of all time. They're one of the bands that were responsible for helping me get into music. So, you know, the fact that I've only really spoken about them in a negative light on my channel is kind of, you know, depressing. So I decided to do this, you know, give my top 10 favorite songs. We're only talking about the best of the best here, or at least in my opinion. So, yeah, today's list, I'm just going to share my 10 favorite Linkin Park songs. No, it's just my favorite songs. I'm not saying that they're the best of all time or anything like that. It's just my own personal opinion. So if yours happen to be different than mine, that's a good thing. And you can leave it down in the comment section below. I'd be very interested to see your own favorite Linkin Park songs. Spoiler alert, there's nothing from One More Light on here, if you couldn't guess already. And without further ado, I think we should just get right into the list. Coming at number 10 on my list, I'll Be Gone from their album Living Things. Now, I'll Be Gone and Living Things as a whole managed to incorporate electronic elements into Linkin Park's typical rock formula, which is something the band did before on albums like 1,000 Suns. However, 1,000 Suns was a lot more experimental. And then on albums like One More Light, it was a bit too radio-friendly, like way too radio-friendly. Living Things is a nice balance, in my opinion. It's something that I feel like someone who's not into heavy music could get into because it has a softer sound to it. It has those electronic elements. But at the same time, someone who's a Linkin Park, big Linkin Park fan, just a fan of their older stuff, could be into this because they like the lyrics, which aren't super changed up from what we saw before, at least in terms of the subject matter. The lyrics here are good. The instrumentals managed to incorporate elements of rock, you know, your guitars and all that stuff with the electronics that are done nicely here. Not either one really overpowers the other. The vocals provided by Chester are nice. It's overall just a very solid song. Coming in at number 9 on my list, I have Paper Cut from their first album, Hybrid Theory. Now, Paper Cut is probably my favorite song from Hybrid Theory, and I know the fact that I don't have more from Hybrid Theory on this list is probably going to anger a lot of people, but honestly, as I've grown older, I've kind of moved away from that album and Meteora. The lyrics just haven't aged quite as well, in my opinion, but there are some tracks that still manage to stand out as being great songs. Paper Cut is one of those. It manages to just incorporate a lot of the elements of Linkin Park, especially back in those early days, that I think made them, you know, Linkin Park. It has the rapping, it has the aggressive vocals, it has the guitars, it has the DJ work. It has all that kind of elements that you would say classify Linkin Park as being Linkin Park back then, and it manages to put them all on one great song. This is a great song to introduce someone to Linkin Park to because it has all those elements. It's the first song on their first album, Hybrid Theory, and I think that's a great placement of the track because it kind of gives you a taste of everything you're going to get from Linkin Park on that album right at the beginning. I like the vocals here. I like the trade-off here. It follows a typical kind of rap verse, sung chorus structure, but it's done very well. The guitars sound great. The DJ parts sound fantastic as well. The scratching. It's overall just a very solid track from an album that is also pretty solid as a whole. Coming in at number 8, I have When They Come For Me from their album 1,000 Suns. Now, I mentioned in the last selection that I didn't have too much from Hybrid Theory on this list, which is probably going to anger a lot of people. But another thing that's probably going to anger a lot of people is the amount of 1,000 Suns on this list, because that's my favorite Linkin Park album. I think it's one of their most diverse albums out there, and that's why I like a lot of the tracks on it. And When They Come For Me is one of those. It's a track that sees Mike doing most of the vocal work here. He raps the verses, and I think these are some of his best raps that he's really done. He's talking about Linkin Park fans that have just kind of refused to move past the Hybrid Theory in Meteora days. Of course, 1,000 Suns was a very experimental record, a very controversial sort of record in the community at the time, you know, before One More Light came out and just kind of made it seem like a lot better. But overall, it was very relevant at the time for Mike to be talking about this stuff. It was a more mature way to go about doing it than telling people to stab themselves in the face. And he just manages to incorporate lots of really cool lines, lots of cool references to older albums and songs. If you kind of look at all the lyrics here and just sort of digest it, you can get a lot out of it. It's really cool the stuff he manages to pack into these verses. And the verses are just one really cool part of the song. The instrumental just has this sort of ominous, very sort of impending doom sort of sound to it. It just sounds very menacing, and I like that. The chorus just kind of has Chester doing these very loud sort of chanting. I guess that's the best word to describe it. His voice just kind of soars here and it sounds great, and then he comes in singing later on in the track and it sounds really great as well. I especially like the end of the track where it just kind of has this explosion of energy with the guitars and all that. It's just a really cool track. I like the energy here. I love the anger that's presented. And it's just a really creative way to kind of address an issue that the band were dealing with at the time, and I wish they were able to do that now, honestly. Coming in at number 7 on my list, I have Rebellion, which features System of a Down guitarist Darren Malakian. This was coming off their album, The Hunting Party, and overall, this track just manages to incorporate a lot of the elements of that album that are really good. It has those very aggressive metal-sounding guitars, of course, Darren being the guitarist for System of a Down, one of the most successful and most popular alternative metal bands out there. He provides a great feel to this track. The guitar riffs sound very much like his own, I guess you could say. If you listen to System of a Down, you know what I mean. His guitar riffs kind of have their own feel to them, and they definitely sound that way here on this track. Not so much like a Linkin Park guitar riff, but it's kind of cool. He manages to have a very big presence on this track as a result of that. He doesn't do any vocal work here. I know he does sing, but not on this song. And I kind of like that because Linkin Park, they already have the multiple vocalists, so it kind of gives them a chance to breathe here. And you do have Mike and Chester singing on this track, and they do a great job trading verses off. And it's overall just a really solid song. I like the aggression that's presented here. It's just really solid all the way through. Coming in at number 6 on my list, I have The Catalyst from their album 1,000 Suns. Now, when I first heard this track a while back when I was younger, it really intrigued me, just the song structure and everything that's going on here. And for those of you who haven't heard the track, it begins off a bit slower, building up, adding more guitars and synths as it goes along until it reaches the middle of the song where there's this big explosion of energy, this sort of climax of awesomeness, of nuclear bombs going off. That's just kind of what I envisioned, given the concept of the album and what it's all talking about. That's just kind of what I feel like this song in particular is like the bombs itself going off, especially towards this middle part. And then it kind of cools down a bit before building up energy again towards the end. I just really think the song structure is cool. As I said before, this track features a lot of synths and electronic elements, but they work well. And Chester's voice sounds really frantic. You know, it sounds apocalyptic, which would make sense given the concept here. It's overall just a fantastic track. My number 5 pick is Little Things Give You Away from their album Minutes to Midnight, the closer track on that album. And I feel like this is one of Linkin Park's best moments with a slower sounding song. And Minutes to Midnight was filled with a lot of those. So, especially when compared to those and some of the ones Linkin Park would go on to make in the future, Little Things stands out a lot just given the subject matter. It has to do with Hurricane Katrina and kind of the aftermath of that. So, if you listen to the lyrics of the track, mentions of being underwater and looking up and stuff, it's just very real, and it comes from a very realistic place, which is something Linkin Park, I don't feel like we're really covering at the time, social issues and things like that. Most of the music had to do more with, feelings and stuff like that. But this was kind of the start of Linkin Park talking about more social issues in their songs, which 1,000 Suns that followed would go on to do in a lot more detail. The track begins off rather slow, but it builds up in energy later on in the track, and it just kind of has this release of energy later on that I just think is really cool. It's kind of like The Catalyst in that regard, but the tone and the mood of those two tracks are completely different, so they don't really have that much in common in that regard. Little Things That Give You Away is just kind of a really underrated Linkin Park song also. I don't hear people talk about it all that much, probably because it's not super aggressive or anything like that. It wasn't like Hybrid Theory or Meteora that preceded it, but it is something that I feel like is really powerful and very important in Linkin Park's career. Next up on my list, I have Keys to the Kingdom from their album, The Hunting Party. It's the first song on the album, and that's really significant for the first time I heard it. Now, when The Hunting Party was released, I ordered the CD, and I put it on my iPod when I got home. I remember I was coming home from school, and I came home, I put it on my iPod, I went to play video games or something, I sat down there to play games on my couch, and I had my iPod in, and I started up the first track, and I really didn't know what to expect because Living Things that came before it was more, as I said earlier, electronic influence. It wasn't super heavy or aggressive, and but the lead single from this album, Guilty All the Same, which is also a great track, also check that out, was a great song. I enjoyed it. It was heavier, but when I heard Keys to the Kingdom, the scream at the beginning of the track from Chester, I was just like, this is going to be a heavy album. This is going to be a good album, and it was all the way through. But Keys to the Kingdom set up my expectations perfectly for this album. It's a very aggressive track to start off an album that's just trying to be very aggressive as a whole. Aside from Chester's, screaming here on this track, Mike also has some very interesting vocal parts. He's singing at one point, and it's not super aggressive when he sings, but it's just kind of a nice break in the song, a softer moment. But then another part he's rapping, and it's very aggressive, the style that he's rapping, and it reminds me a lot of When They Come For Me in terms of the aggression that he's providing. And it's just overall very cool. The instrumentals on this track are also great. The guitars just sound very hard-hitting and, aggressive. They kind of have that older alternative rock, alternative metal, hard rock kind of sound to them. And it's overall just a phenomenal track. I love the aggression here, and it's a great way to start off the hunting party. Coming in at number 3 on my list, I have Breaking the Habit from their album, Meteora. It's probably going to anger a lot of people that this is the only song on my list from that album, but I kind of feel the same way about this one as I did with Hybrid 3, that with age, the lyrics haven't, stood out to me quite as much as they did when I was younger. But Breaking the Habit is a bit different in the regard that I think I've grown to appreciate the lyrics more as I've gotten older. The lyrics here show the narrator of this track faced with some sort of addiction, some sort of problem, and they just need to break this kind of habit that they have. And it seems like they're going towards suicide with just how, frantic they are in trying to solve this problem. And it's not exactly specified that it is suicide in this, the lyrics here of this track, but, it's kind of implied to a degree in the music video for the track. I haven't seen it in a while, but I believe that there was stuff in that video that did kind of imply that as well. So it is a more heavy subject matter for Linkin Park, at least back then. And I do like how it's not a super heavy Linkin Park song either. I mean, those older albums were known for being heavier, but this track is a bit of a softer moment, yet it kind of matches with the tone of the track. It has this sort of frantic feel to it in the instrumental. It's not super heavy, but it still kind of moves at a very fast speed. And I think it works well. It kind of shows the inner workings of the person's mind, the narrator's mind, and how they're kind of really frantic trying to find a solution for their problem. Overall, Breaking the Habit provides a lot of emotional power to it, especially given that Chester had problems with drugs before joining Linkin Park. So I have a feeling that this track would resonate a lot with him, and that's why he's able to perform it so well. Though I heard it was actually Mike who penned the lyrics to this track, which, funny how that worked out, I guess. But still a great Linkin Park song. The emotion is great here. The instrumental is very enjoyable. It matches the emotion well. And the delivery of the lines is also just fantastic. As I said before, Chester, he just kind of owns this track. As I said, great song. Coming in at my number 2 spot is the song Blackout from their album 1,000 Suns. Now this is another song that has a very interesting structure to it. It starts off kind of with these ominous synth parts before kicking into this very, very aggressive part with Chester. And while Chester isn't stranger to his screaming and these more aggressive moments in Linkin Park songs, just look at any of their earlier material, what really kind of stands out here is the instrumentation. While he may be screaming a ton here, the instrumentation isn't super heavy guitars or anything like that. It's just kind of this very bare bones sort of piano kind of part that's just provides this really weird juxtaposition between the vocals and the instrumentation. The instrumentation is so much more not in your face as the vocals are. The vocals are very much, very, screaming at you, quite literally, but the instrumentation is very different. It's just a very weird feeling listening to this track. It sounds very ominous. It sounds very creepy to an extent. It sounds, very, I know I've been using this word a lot, but frantic. And then towards the middle of the track, it becomes a bit more interesting with this DJ part, which kind of breaks down the song. It takes the vocals that Chester was kind of performing the first half, kind of mixes them up, splices them together in a very interesting way. As the beat underneath becomes a bit more aggressive, it just mixes everything up in a very aggressive sort of, just this kind of blender, flurry of, chaos. And it sounds really cool. It provides a lot of energy to the track. And I like how they're able to incorporate this more electronic element of, mixing up the vocals and incorporate into the song nicely. And then towards the end of the song, the beat kind of cools down again into this very basic synth part as Mike begins singing, and then Chester's vocals join in. The instrumentation becomes a bit more grand, and it's just this very creepy feel towards the outro. It's just, them singing together in unison, and the creepy synth parts. It's just a very ominous feel to it. After that kind of explosion of energy at the beginning of the track, in the middle of the track, and then this ending is just really kind of creepy and different. And especially like how the last sung line just kind of distorted the vocals, and it kind of becomes almost mechanical and robot-like. That was kind of a really cool effect, a cool use of a vocal effect in a song. Overall, Blackout just managed to be one of those standout tracks between the vocals and the instrumentation, all the changes that we get here. It's just a song that I keep going back to time and time again, and with good reason. It's just a fantastic song and a really underrated song. No, my number one spot is not in the end. It's not in my top 20. It's not even in my top 30. But let's talk about Waiting for the End, rather. Another song which has the word end in the title, but I think is much better. But putting it here is still probably going to anger a lot of people, so let me explain. I think Waiting for the End is just one of those songs that I kind of developed a connection to for no apparent reason. Honestly, this track isn't even one of the more experimental songs on 1,000 Suns like Blackout or Catalyst or When They Come For Me, as I mentioned earlier in this list. It's a bit more basic, but I still really like it. Mike's rapping sounds very interesting, he sounds very alive here, and he provides some very good verses here on this track. And Chester's vocals, it starts off a bit slower here on this track, but as it goes on, it builds up more, the instrumentation becomes a bit more grand, and his vocals kind of match that. It just has a bit of an explosion of energy towards the end of the track with Mike's final verse, or not his final verse, it's the one that's more towards the middle of the track. But Chester's vocals here at the end just provide a lot of energy to the end of the track. And the lyrics here are also very nice. Just, talking about how, in the context of the record, at least for 1,000 Suns, I like to think, it's kind of an apocalyptic album. Just, waiting for the end. It's just kind of like anticipating the apocalypse that's going to be coming soon. And it's just kind of a creepy thing. So yeah, that's why Waiting for the End is my number one song. And honestly, I know it doesn't seem like I explained it that much compared to some of the other songs here on this list, or there wasn't that much interesting to say about it compared to some of the other songs here on this list. But, even I don't know why this is my number one song. I just really like it, okay? Is that a bad thing? So yeah, overall that was my top 10 Linkin Park songs. I'm sure this list probably angered a lot of people due to the lack of Hybrid Theory and Meteora and the abundance of 1,000 Suns here. But, that's just my opinion, guys. If you have your own opinion, if you really like those first two albums, that's not a bad thing by any means, and feel free to like those. Leave your list down below, as I said before. I greatly appreciate seeing other people's opinions on Linkin Park and their favorite songs. Like I said, this is just my opinion, so if you happen to not like any of the songs here, or if you happen to like other Linkin Park songs that aren't on this list, it doesn't mean I didn't like those songs, it just means that they didn't make the top 10, that's all. There's going to be an honorable mention section down in the description below if you want to check that out also, in no particular order, mind you. Those are also some songs I really like. As I said before, I like all Linkin Park's albums with the exception of their newest one, which we don't speak about. Yeah. So I recommend all their other albums, if you're just curious to know that. Maybe I'll review them all someday. If you enjoyed this video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because we do all kinds of top 10 lists here on the channel, album reviews, all kinds of music-related content. Comment down below, like I said before, your own top 10 list or top 20 list, or even if you want to rank all the Linkin Park songs in one big list down there below. I definitely read that, so, if you want to do that, go right ahead. And if you want to listen to these songs and you have a Spotify account, I'm going to have a link down there in the description below, along with the honorable mentions, a link to my Spotify playlist that I made for this top 10 list, so you can listen to these songs on Spotify. Real cool. Thanks for watching again. Subscribe and stay golden.